Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm really excited to have Lisa Jewell joining us. I'm sure lots of you know Lisa Jewell, but for those who don't know Lisa, Lisa was born in London. Her first novel, Ralph's Party, was the best-selling debut novel of 1999. Since then, she has published another 16 novels, most recently a number of dark psychological thrillers, including The Girls and Then She Was Gone, as well as I Found You and Watching You. Lisa is a top 10 New York Times and #1 Sunday Times best-selling author who has been published worldwide in over 25 languages. She lives in North London with her husband, 2 daughters, 2 cats, 2 guinea pigs, and the best dog in the world. So thanks so much, Lisa, for joining us. And also wanted to say thanks for Karina for joining us today as well. So Karina Kilmore is one of Global Girl Online Book Club's associated authors. And wanted to also say, Lisa, this is the second time we've actually had you in our group, because we had The Family Upstairs was one of our early book club reads, and you kindly answered some questions and did videos for us, which was really, really great.
Oh, yes, I remember well, yes.
And wanting to mention The Night She Disappeared, I just finished reading it and absolutely loved it. Was 5 out of 5 for me. It was a great read, so really recommending it to everyone. And wanting to say to everyone watching that thanks to Penguin, if you ask a question during the Facebook Live, you'll have a chance to win a copy of The Night She Disappeared. So thanks so much, Lisa.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Just wondered if maybe you wanted to start off by telling us a bit about The Night She Disappeared.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, this is my 19th novel. Quite a few things have changed since that bio was written, actually. I've only got 1 cat and 1 guinea pig now.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, but I do still have the best dog in the world. Yeah, so this is The Night She Disappeared, which is my 19th novel, and it is the story of teenage parents, Zach and Tallulah, who head off to the village pub on a Friday night, and while they're there, they meet some of the posh kids from the local boarding school and get invited back to this amazing mansion out in the countryside outside the village for a pool party. And Tallulah texts her mum, who's babysitting her baby son Noah, and says, is it all right if we stay out a bit longer? We've been invited out by some people. And her mum says, stay out as long as you like, darling, have fun. And Zach and Tallulah never come home. And then we pick up the action a year later when a new head teacher has just started working at the boarding school in the village, and his girlfriend is a detective novelist, and while she's exploring the grounds of the boarding school on her first day, she finds a sign nailed to a fence with the words "dig here" written on it, and she digs and finds a clue to the disappearance of Zach and Tallulah.
I love that idea of a boarding school as a setting for a thriller. What came first, the story or the characters or the
yeah, it's different. Every novel is different in terms of what comes first, and there is always something that comes first. You don't get the whole book sort of land in your lap, all sort of ready formed with all the people and the settings and the ideas, and there's always one thing that just sort of captures your imagination. You think, I'd really like to write about that. And for me, quite often, it's a person. It's a person whose head I want to get into, whose experience of being a human being I want to get into. But with this one, it was actually the boarding school. I just thought, here I am, I'm writing my 19th novel, and I've never written about a boarding school. And it's such a classic setting for any sort of story. But I thought it would be a particularly good setting for a murder mystery. So yeah, that's where it started. And then as I kind of started nurturing this boarding school idea and imagining how I might use it, this image appeared in my head of a sign with "dig here" written on it, and I thought, okay, that's my in. That's how I'm going to get into this story. I don't know what the story is yet, but that's my in. Someone is going to arrive at this boarding school, and they're going to find a sign, and they're going to find something, and then I will know what the story is.
And were you a boarding school kid, or
no, not at all. No. Yeah. So my this boarding school was actually I was driving 6 years ago through the countryside in Surrey, just outside London, to collect our puppy from the breeder. And we just kept driving through these stunning villages that I'd never driven through before. I always thought you had to get way out of London to get to such beautiful places, such picturesque spots. But this was, just the other side of London, and we drove past this boarding school, and it was for 16 to 19-year-olds. So it wasn't for kids; it was for children taking their exams. Basically, it was probably like a crammer college, basically. And I just remember thinking, wow, what an amazing place to stay, to experience, to take your exams. And I didn't think at the time, oh yeah, obviously I'm going to set a novel there one day. It's just, I think as a writer, you just store these things away like squirrels storing nuts. It's just there. It's just there. And at some point you will just open your laptop and start typing, and it will suddenly appear, because it was there waiting all along. And that was the case with this school. But no, I didn't go to a boarding school. I went to a normal school.
We've got a lot of people watching, which is really great, and got some questions coming through. So I'll ask a question that Kylie has written. So she says she loves a good psychological thriller. I find the story stays with me long after the last page, and I become wary of people. How does writing dark characters affect you, and where do you find your inspiration for dark personas?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I socialize quite a lot with other writers in my genre. I meet them a lot. I meet them at book events and festivals, and socially, and at parties and launches. And if there's one thing we've all got in common, particularly the female writers of dark psychological fiction and thrillers, is that we're all just really nice, kind of positive, upbeat, sunshiny people who, for some reason, and maybe you have to be that way, maybe you have to have the light inside your soul in order to want to explore these darker people. Maybe if you're dark already, there isn't that same sort of kind of fascination with how people operate on the darker side of the psychological spectrum. So yeah, it doesn't affect me at all when I'm writing these dark characters, any more than just I really enjoy it, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. And the darker the character, the more fun that character is to write, and to engage with them on the page. So yeah, I think the inspiration for the darkness probably comes from my own lightness, and just wanting to know, wanting to feel, wanting to understand, wanting to be in these other places. Yeah.
Because I've heard it said, heard you describe, Lisa, as the queen of the suburban nightmare. Is that you make these ordinary situations, excuse my...
Oh no, beautiful.
Wanting to showcase himself. The queen of the urban nightmare, because a lot of your settings and storylines are just ordinary people, ordinary situations, and they turn into these incredible stories.
Well, that's the contrast, isn't it? And that's why domestic noir is another name for the genre. And that's why, because a lot of these stories are about people who have found their safe place in life. They've found their partner, they've had their children, they've got their house, they've got their job, they've got their friendship group. They've got everything that you think you need to be safe. But we all know that we're only one bad decision, one stranger, one moment away from everything just exploding. You just need to let the wrong person into your life, or let your child out, or on the street, or be 5 minutes late for something, or forget to lock your door, or we're all 1 second away from this like beautiful safe existence that we've all built for ourselves unraveling. And I think that's the key. That's why people like to read it, because it's sort of, that sort of vicarious. We all have these weird little fears in the back of our heads. I was trying to get through to my daughter, and we'd been out of town all day, and I was messaging her, and I knew she was in the house because we'd seen her on our Ring app come into the house. So the fact that she wasn't answering her phone, I just thought, well, she's clearly dead. She's clearly dead. That's the only possible explanation for why she's not replying to any of my text messages. And actually, it just turned out she was asleep. But all of our heads are just full of these crazy moments of just thinking the worst, imagining the sort of worst case scenario. And yeah, so that, I think that's the appeal of writing about these sorts of things.
It's really relatable. You know,
yeah,
it
exactly.
can happen to anyone, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're all of us are just one beat away from our lives unraveling. So, and that's what it taps into.
And Belinda, she says she's on her third Lisa Jewell book, and
yes, that's what I like. An addict, good.
She's loved them all, and she's wondering if any of your books have been made into movies or been optioned for movies.
Yeah, no, none. So I've written 19 books, and every single book I've ever written, I've had readers saying, this should be made into a TV show, this should be made into a movie. And I think people read my books in a very visual way, and they imagine. I get a lot of feedback from readers where they can, they imagine who might play the roles, or but to this point, nothing has ever gone into production. I've had a few things optioned over the years, but currently I have one of my romantic comedies and 6 of my thrillers under option with various production companies. So I'm hoping that purely, the numbers game.
The odds master.
One
eventually.
One of them surely has got to go into production. I can't believe that all of these will just sort of fall by the wayside. But yeah, up until now, no, nothing's gone further than being optioned.
And do you think that there's one that would be the best one for a movie?
People don't really talk to me about movies anymore. They talk to me about
TV series,
Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of these. This is what people talk to me about now. So at the moment, I'm thinking this one. I do think it's I think the setting of it is so exquisite, and it's in the sun. It's set in the summer, so it'll be the British countryside, all set alive and sparkling in the British summer weather. Swimming pools, mansions, boarding schools, weeping willows, village ponds, village pubs. And then all this darkness under the surface, and I can imagine that would translate really, really beautifully onto the screen, but would also have that sort of international appeal for people who like their sort of, beautiful, picturesque British settings. So so I'm thinking this one might be a really good one.
Yeah, the house sounds amazing in that one as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, the house was, like, I think the most fun. I always like describing houses, and I think this is the most fun I've ever had with an imaginary house. It was it was really, really enjoyable to bring it to life on the page.
I think Invisible Girl would also make a great series, because you could go, each episode could be the head of one of those characters. And it could just sort of play out over the series. You finally get to see inside each character what's really going on. I love that book.
So Invisible Girl is set in a really beautiful part of North London. So again, you'd get the lovely setting of Hampstead and what have you, although it is set in the winter, so it would be darker, but that's quite good as well. The sort of shadowy kind of dark London. And it's also got the incel character in it, which I think is just something that hasn't really been tapped into on the screen yet. I don't think I've seen anything that's fictional about a character who's part of the incel community. So that would like sort of take it into a different. So that could be a really good one as well. That one is under option, so you know.
Oh, it is. Oh, I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah,
so
that one's
for
under.
Our audience, Lisa, tell us about incel, because that's one of the.
Oh yeah.
I've researched as a journalist. I've researched a lot about incel, but tell our audience.
So many people don't know what the incel.
That's right.
Incel is an abbreviation of involuntary celibate, and this is a sort of a sect of men who are not attractive to women, who don't get to have sex with women, and it kind of started on the internet as these chat rooms, and everybody has pseudonyms and avatars, and they're not, and they talk to each other in very misogynistic ways. about, and not just they're not just misogynistic. They hate women, obviously, because women don't want to have sex with them, but they also hate men who get to have sex with women as well. And they think that society is at fault, and that these wrongs could be righted in some way in their favour. It's like they feel they have a right to sex. And unfortunately, sometimes members of this community can become quite radical and commit acts of terrorism. We had one here in the UK late summer where a guy took a gun around his local area and just shot people dead because he was just really, really angry about the fact that he didn't have a girlfriend. Oh, poor him.
But it's actually quite a huge movement.
It's a very dangerous movement. It's a very dangerous, sexually repressed and frustrated men with access to guns and access to all sorts of other things. It's very dangerous indeed.
Well, Netflix, are you listening? Because you know.
Exactly.
Bear wonders if you have any large celebrations planned for your 20th novel.
Good question. Oh, that's a really good question. And it will be 2022, and COVID will be
even
gone,
better.
and the sun will be shining because it will be summer. I really should have some big celebrations, shouldn't I?
You should, yeah.
I'm getting on it. I'm getting on it. Yeah. I'm going to talk to my publishers about that. I should have a big party, shouldn't I? So the 20th book is coming out in the UK and Australia and New Zealand on the 21st of July 2022, and yes, I'm definitely going to have a party. Thank you. Who was that who asked that brilliant question?
That was Bear Carroll, who's actually an author, an Australian author. Yeah.
She's an Aussie writer as well. Actually, Lisa, your first novel has an Australian, so just for everyone who's watching, we've got 8,000 members. We've got about 50% in Australia and New Zealand, 25% in the UK, 25% in the US. So, but your first novel, Ralph's Party, I think has got a little story that involves an Australian angle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Really?
So this is, so I met a girl called Yasmin Boland through my boyfriend back in the 90s, and she was a journalist at the time. And we all went on holiday together, my boyfriend and Yasmin and a bunch of other people. Just after I'd lost my job, I was a secretary at the time. And I had just read High Fidelity by Nick Hornby and was feeling quite fired up and inspired by this. I always had this sort of secret ambition to write a book, but thought it'd be something I did when I was 50. And at that point, I was 26. And Yasmin and I got very drunk one night and started talking about my as you do when you're on holiday. And she basically, I said in a very throwaway manner that maybe instead of being a secretary I could maybe think about writing a novel. And she basically said, do it. If you do it, just write 3 chapters and I'll take you out for dinner to your favorite restaurant. Which I did. We shook hands and everything, and I wasn't going to renege on a bet, so I did it, and I handed her the 3 chapters in an Indian restaurant in North London, and she read the 3 chapters and she bullied me into sending them to a load of literary agents, and I got a publishing deal. And so that was Ralph's Party. But the wonderful postscript to that is that Yasmin was so inspired by the fact that her words had been so powerful and had caused this seismic shift in my life and taken me from secretary to published novelist, that she wrote a novel. And it was called Carole King as an Alien, and it was published by Penguin. And she had a big launch party in Sydney. And so I flew out and spent a week with her in Sydney because she'd moved back to Australia at that point. And so she wrote 2 novels for Penguin back in the noughties. And now she's a world-renowned astrologist and still my very, very, very good friend. So yes, that's the marvelous Yasmin Boland.
No, that's an interesting story.
And great connection too.
Yes, absolutely. I still cannot conceive of where I would be now or what would have happened if we hadn't had that conversation. Because as I say, at that point in my life, I thought I could definitely write a book, but I definitely thought I needed to wait until I'd had more life experience. And I'm so glad I didn't wait. I'm so glad I just cracked on with it in my 20s and got on with it.
Yeah. Oh, how did you crack on with it? Because you were working full time by the sound of it. You were.
Well, what actually happened was, so I wrote these 3 chapters, and Yasmin made me send them out to all the literary agents, and I got all the rejection letters from the literary agents, but I got one letter saying I'd like to see the rest. And at that point, my boyfriend, who is now my husband, said, and I wasn't living with him at the time, he said, if you move in here with me, then you don't need to pay rent anymore and you could get a part-time job. So for a year, I lived in my boyfriend's flat and worked part-time and wrote part-time. So that's how I did it. I did have to change my life. But as he said to me at the time, not everybody gets a letter like this from a literary agent. And I thought, you're absolutely right. Even if nothing happens, you can't ignore a sign like this from the universe. So
Oh, what a great story. I love it.
It is a really nice story. It's a lovely story. Still gives me goosebumps.
Oh yeah.
And I've got a great question from Fiona. So Fiona says she loves your books, and considering the amount of psychological thrillers in the market at the moment, is it difficult to find an idea that hasn't already been written?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, yes, but you just can't worry about that. So, for example, when I was writing this, when I was writing The Night She Disappeared, which starts off with a young grandmother babysitting her grandson, and her teenage daughter disappears and leaves her to bring up the grandson on her own. And I was halfway through writing it, and I was sitting on a plane back from America and watched a movie called, I think, American Wife, or the good anyway, I can't remember the name of the movie. It had Sienna Miller in it playing an American character, and exactly the same thing happens to her. She's a young, glamorous grandmother. She's got a teenage daughter who goes out on a date and never comes home and leaves her to bring up her grandson. And I just thought, oh no, I'm going to get that. People are going to think that I copied this, and that. But then I wrote the book, and then the book is absolutely nothing like the movie. And so you just can't, you have to completely separate yourself from what anybody else is doing, and just absolutely home in on the things that are inspiring you and that are sort of tickling away and at the sort of core of your imagination, the little things that you just keep wanting to write about and keep wanting to piece together into a story, and not think about what anybody else is doing or what you've seen or what you've heard. Because even if you are writing the same story as somebody else, it would be completely and utterly different to their take on it. So yeah, I don't worry about that.
And Tasman says your books have evolved from your first novel, Ralph's Party, and she's been a fan ever since. She wonders what made you change direction.
Yeah, it wasn't like one big step. I didn't just step from one genre to the other. I just did it book by book. I had a really long stretch of time to do it over. And there was this quite helpful bit of my career in the middle where my sales had started to dip a bit. And so I'd gone from being best-selling chick lit author of romantic comedies and people like, anxiously awaiting my next book and expecting it to be like the last book they'd read, to this point where I felt like I wasn't bringing any new readers into the mix, and I wanted to start exploring what else I wanted to write about apart from relationships. And I grew older as well. I was in my 30s, I had a baby, and I just, because I felt like I had a bit of freedom at that point to be a bit more experimental, I just started pushing it a little bit with each book, pushing the boundaries a bit, and just seeing what I could get away with, and seeing if anybody was going to complain, if my publishers were going to complain or my readers were going to complain, and they never did. So just kept getting darker and leaving the romantic relationships behind. And then I got into family drama, and then I started leaving the families behind and getting more into just the sort of thriller thing. So it was never, you can't look at my books and find a point where I went from A to B.
No. So it was just
there was this whole sort of slow drift. Yeah. It was a slow drift from one genre to the other.
Yeah, and some of them are two genres already. They cross over, and then the next one crosses over again, and
yeah, and that's the thing. You can't if you started off writing romantic fiction, you can never unplug yourself from wanting to get into that side of human relationships. And there's a lot of, in my thrillers, there's a lot of, whenever I put a male and, in fact, I was saying a male and female character together, and quite a few of my books are male and a male character together and a female and female. But whenever I put two characters together, let's put it that way, there's always the potential for them to be attracted to each other. And I would never shy away from that. I will always follow those romantic sparks when they come off the page and see where they go. And that informs the suspense just as much as the dark stuff as well, the way that people behave when they are in love or chasing someone, or their sexual tension, or all of these things. So yeah, you can't just leave everything behind and just say, okay, I don't write about that anymore, I only write about this. It's all part of the same thing. Families, romance, sex, all of it is all part of the thing that informs a psychological thriller.
I'm wondering if you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would that be?
Oh, I've been asked this before, and I always give the same reply, which is I would literally, if I walked into a room and saw young me tapping away on a massive great computer, as it would have been back then, I would just close the door very quietly and tiptoe away and let her get on with it. Because every single thing that I have done has brought me, and there is a couple of books that I would probably rather not have written, which I'm not particularly fond of, but every single book I've written, every single thing I've done has brought me to this point where I am now, which is a really, really amazing place to find yourself as a 53-year-old writer of 22 years standing, to be topping the charts. Since that bio that you read out earlier, Jackie, I have had a #1 New York Times bestseller as well. So I'm now at Sunday Times and New York Times #1 bestseller, and to have been opened up to this vast new readership that I've acquired in the last couple of years across the, very apt for you with the Global Girls Book Club across the world. No, I wouldn't say a word to her. I would just walk away and let her get on with it, because I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than where I am at this precise moment. This is a very awesome place to be.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear.
And what is your day like, Lisa? How do you operate as a writer? What's your routine?
Oh, I'm going to have to talk in the past tense here, because at the moment I'm having such a struggle being a writer. I can't tell you. So how I got through the last two, we had 2 big lockdowns here in the UK, and how I got through those was by renting external office space. Because I could not, the government guidelines was, if you can work from home, please work from home. And I know that the country was full of people struggling working from home, with children having to homeschool children and run businesses and what have you. And I have nothing but awe and respect for them. I couldn't do it. I could not do it. So I wrote most of The Night She Disappeared in my external office, and I wrote the first chunk of the book that I'm writing at the moment in my external office. And then lockdown ended, and then my children went back to school, and then I couldn't justify paying for writing space anymore when I have a nice house here. I don't have an office. The problem being I don't have an office because I've always written at the kitchen table. And now it's September, so it's back to school time, and this is when I normally really crack my knuckles and get down to work and hit that deadline, which for me is the end of the year. And I can't. I just keep dreaming about my external office space. I'm thinking I can't write in my house anymore. It's just gone. That connection I had with the kitchen table. It's really, really troubling me. It's really troubling me. I should be well back into the swing of writing now, my 1,000 words a day, which is what I try to write. So yeah, I hope I don't end up having to rent external office space again. I hope I can somehow come to terms with my kitchen table again and get back into the groove. But at the moment, no. But so that's me at the moment, not being a very successful writer at the moment. But generally speaking, yes, I'm not a morning writer, very unusual, because most writers write in the morning. I'm an afternoon writer. So in the morning, I get all my jobs done, domestic jobs and professional jobs. And then I walk the dog, and then I have my lunch, and then I sit at my kitchen table, theoretically. And then I've written 1,000 words, I stop. And that's how I structure my days. But please send me hopes and prayers.
Sending them now.
Thank you.
Back to the kitchen table with you.
Yes, lots of expensive external office space.
Yeah. And how has COVID impacted in Australia and New Zealand? We're still in lockdown, most cities, but you're out of lockdown. What's life like now for COVID? You know, with COVID.
It's kind of weird. It is really weird because we've still got loads of COVID. Everyone's got COVID. It's just like everyone's got COVID, and it's just a thing. And but life has returned to normal. It was very much a sense of on July the 19th, which we called Freedom Day, we're taking away all restrictions, and then we're just going to get on with it and see what happens. And we thought that there was going to be a massive spike when the schools went back, but there hasn't been. And yeah, I think there was a lot of doom and gloom about what the autumn was going to look like. It is only September still, but at the moment the sun is shining, everything's normal. People wear masks indoors, in crowded areas, but that's it. And you can go where you want, do what you want, eat what you want, drink what you want, see who you want, have people in and out your house as much as you like, and it feels normal. But COVID is everywhere. It's very strange.
And I'm wondering, will you ever mention COVID in any of your books?
No, absolutely, categorically not. I read a couple of books this year that the writers had written during 2020 that were published this year, and you could tell it had been tacked on to the end or put in as a retroactive kind of thing of like, oh sugar, my book is set in 2020 and I really probably should mention COVID, which I don't think was very successful. I certainly think there's room for someone to write a COVID novel. But in terms of the sorts of books I write, I very much want to keep it out of my books completely. So the book I'm writing at the moment is set in 2018, I believe. And I will keep setting my books in 2018 or 2019 until such time as there's no COVID left anywhere in the world, and we've all sort of got used to it and got on with it. And it's not that it's gone, because it will never be gone, but that we stop talking about it and living our lives shaped by it. So no, you will not find the C word in any of my books.
That's a much nicer C word.
Yes.
And
yes,
I've got a
indeed.
few people who are wondering what sort of books you like to read yourself, and maybe if there's anything you can recommend to us that you might have been reading lately.
I actually have a little pile here. Oh, I put the wrong book on the pile. Hold on. Where's it gone? That one. I've another thing I'm struggling with apart from writing is reading. I've really struggled with reading since the COVID pandemic started, and so I haven't read as widely as I would normally have read, so I don't have as many books to recommend. I've just turned into a really slow reader. But this was, if anybody else is struggling with reading,
I've got that one
if
too
anyone else is struggling with
Okay.
reading, this is the one for you. I read that in 5 hours.
Oh,
It's just
really?
incredible. So this is the woman, Jean Korelitz, who wrote this, which is the book that The Undoing was based on, which was that Netflix series of Nicole Kidman and Hugh Grant. Brilliant. So that was brilliant. Then I also read this, which Saint X by Alexis Shatkin. I don't know how you pronounce it. But this was a really interesting read. It was about a family. It reminds me a bit of, did anybody watch White Lotus?
No, I haven't.
No.
Oh, it's a brilliant show. It's set in a 5-star resort in Hawaii. And funny things happening to the guests. But so this is about a wealthy family who are on holiday in a 5-star resort in the Caribbean, on this fictional island called St. X, and their 18-year-old daughter disappears and is found dead, not murdered, and they never find out who killed her or how she died. And then her baby sister, we meet her sort of 18 years later, and she gets in a cab in New York City and realizes it's driven by one of the two guys who was suspect in her sister's disappearance 18 years earlier, and she starts stalking him and becomes quite obsessed with him. So that was really, really good. Thoroughly recommend. And I am currently reading The Last House on Needham Street, which
I've heard good things about that one.
Weirdly, these are all American books. Usually, when you ask me what sort of books I normally read, I read a lot of British domestic noir. Yeah. All my contemporaries are Louise Candlish and Ruth Ware and Claire McIntosh, and all those are all my favourites. But the three I'm recommending are all American. So I'm only like 50 pages into this, and it's all very strange. And the last chapter I read was narrated by the main character's cat. So
oh really? Wow.
But look, the quote on the front said, I haven't read anything this exciting since Gone Girl, and that's Stephen King. Okay. So I've got high hopes for that, and I think it's great. So yeah, those are my recommendations.
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing.
It's interesting that you said it was hard to read, because I've found it really hard to read as well, and I've gone more and more to audiobooks. You know, listening to audiobooks that I can do it any time, when I'm cooking, when I'm walking. You know.
Yeah, I need to get into that. This is what this is. I need to turn that corner. At the moment, I walk the dog every day, and I like to feel the connection with where I am with the dog, and I like to be able to hear traffic, and so that's my excuse for not listening to audiobooks when I walk the dog. But maybe if I experimented with it, I would find that I liked that just as much as sort of listening to the voice, the noises of the real world going on around me. But yeah, I think that might be, and I know lots and lots of readers have turned to audio during the last couple of years as a more efficient way of reading, because it's really, I just have found this whole pandemic thing, it was already happening because of smartphones, but my attention, my focus is just splintered all the time. So hard just to focus on one thing at a time. But I guess, if you're listening to an audiobook, you can do other things and also be enjoying a book. So I should probably try it.
I think audio sales too. Your books are available on audio as well.
Yeah.
Audio sales have gone through the roofs in the last
crazy, absolutely crazy. It used to be an afterthought in any publishing contract or in any publishing deal. The audiobook, nobody really thought about it. It was just a sort of like I say, like an afterthought, and now it's just a massive part of the publication process. And so much thought given to
ebooks.
Absolutely, yes.
Belinda wonders, when you start writing, do you know the ending?
No, I have no clue of the ending. I'm trying to think through my thrillers. I think I Found You, which is one of my earlier thrillers. I think that's the only time I didn't know what the ending was, but I knew what the thing was, if you know what I mean. If you can see the subtle difference between, I didn't know how it was going to end, but I knew what the thing was that would bring me to my ending. But I don't even generally have a clue about what the thing is. I knew obviously that my character Tallulah had gone missing after a night at a mansion in the country, and there was a swimming pool involved, and that is all I knew. I knew that I was going to have to bring her story somehow back to the night that she was in the pub and ended up going to this girl's house for a party. But I had no idea what was going to happen at that party, whether she was going to be alive or dead at the end of it, whether Zach had anything to do with it. I didn't know. The only way I know what's going on in my books is by writing them. So I just have to write them to work out what's going to happen.
Wow.
And I'm wondering if you could tell us, for you, what does a successful writer mean?
Good question, because I think I've always been perceived as a successful writer, even when my publishers were finding it challenging to push my sales across the line and to know what to do with my books. And when I wasn't getting reviewed in things and I wasn't being included on lists, but I was still selling enough books for me to get advances that meant I didn't have to get a second job. So I don't know. That's a really, really good question. But at the time, because I would like make appearances in the top 10, and was a full-time writer, I was perceived to be successful, but I felt, I don't know, it felt a bit tenuous back then. I was like, okay, in this moment now, I have a publishing contract that means I get to write and publish 2 more books, but I didn't feel confident about what would happen on the other side of those 2 books. I didn't have this sense of security that, oh, I'll write these 2 books and then I'll sign another contract and write another 2 books. It was a sort of slightly kind of nerve-wracking sense of, if something doesn't happen, if something big doesn't happen, I feel like this could just trickle away from me in a way. And yeah, so I think successful maybe that's what successful is that you don't worry about what's going to happen after your current contract. You don't have that sense of sort of trepidation that something could go wrong. And yeah, maybe that's what it is. It's really hard one to kind of grapple with, because everybody's definition. So if you're a struggling writer, your definition of successful would be very, very different to a writer who had once sold 250,000 copies of their debut novel, now only selling 60,000 copies. 60,000 copies is still a lot of books. So it's all relative. It's all relative, very much.
And also following on from that as well, do you, like, you've had some very, very successful books and done like top in the like the New York Times top sellers, and just wondering, do you feel pressure with your next book, each next book, that you need to do better? And
I tell you what, actually, and this is going back to the question about what's a successful writer, and what I should have also said, of course, is that happy readers as well is a sign of being a successful writer. And I have very, very happy readers at the moment. I feel like I'm getting a lot of love back, and people are really appreciating the books that I'm writing and that they're reading. I've lost my thread. What was the question? I've gone off.
The pressure of getting better. Yeah.
So what a lot of readers have been saying to me is, oh, I've just read the new Lisa Jewell, and as ever, she never disappoints. She never disappoints. She never disappoints. And that's starting to build up into a sort of tattoo in my head of like, she never disappoints. She never disappoints. She never disappoints. And now it's sort of like, yeah, I'm starting to freak out a bit that the next one is going to be disappointing. Which is so I think being successful is not disappointing your readers as well. And yeah, so it does feel quite pressurizing, the fact that people now pick up my books thinking it's a Lisa Jewell, I know I'm going to enjoy it, and what if they pick the next one up and they don't enjoy it? That's a really horrible feeling, a horrible thought. So yeah, that's a very certain kind of pressure.
Well, that hasn't happened yet.
Not yet, exactly. But, like the characters in my books who are only one beat away from their whole lives imploding. I'm only one bad book away from everybody. I'm not going to bother with her next one.
Does that mean you're a pessimist, Lisa, or?
No, not at all. Not at all. No, it's taken. If you'd asked me this question before, this book, for the last few previous books, I would have said I don't feel very pressurized, actually. But I think there's just been this build up I think I've written 4 or 5 good books in a row. So now the expectation is that, oh, well, Lisa Jewell always writes good books. Whereas if I'd written a sort of if I'd had a patchier run, which I have had patchy before, then there wouldn't be the same sort of pressure. No, I'm not a pessimist. I'm an eternal optimist. My rule for living is it'll be all right, because everything is all right. But it doesn't mean that I don't entertain worst case scenarios as well. But I don't let those worst case scenarios stop me doing things or stop me feeling happy or confine me in any way. I can think of worst case scenarios, but then just crack on and get on with it, and not get bogged down by it.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great chatting to you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful. Some fantastic questions.
Yeah,
as well.
there was
really
some
good.
great. Yeah. And
Particularly the
thanks,
one about my
everyone.
20th book celebration.
Yeah, you'll have to let us know how that planning goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe a tour to New Zealand. New Zealand.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
New Zealand and Australia. Yeah.
Global.
Exactly, yeah.
That's right. A global celebration, absolutely.
With a party in every stop. Yeah.
Sounds great. And can you tell people watching how the best way is to keep in touch with what's happening with you?
Yeah, so well, you can sign up for my newsletter, which I wish I knew how you could sign up to my newsletter, but I'm sure if you Google Lisa
on your
newsletter,
on your website, maybe.
I think it's on the Penguin Random House website and the Simon & Schuster website as well. I think you can get to it either way. So yes, I have a monthly newsletter, and you definitely get stuff before everybody else on that, like sneaky looks at early chapters and chapter reveal, chapter title reveal news and cover reveal news and all that sort of business. I am on Twitter, but I don't really post on Twitter. I just reply to messages on Twitter. I am on Instagram and always reply to PMs. I don't post that much on Instagram, but what I do post is very nice. And yeah, and I have an official page on Facebook which has lots of news as well. That's the one that's probably updated the most.
Well, thank you, and thanks for your support again, and we'll be looking forward to your new books out, and hopefully we might have a chance to talk to you another time.
Amazing. Yeah, for my 20th birthday.
Yeah.
Celebration.
Yeah. All right.
Party we're all coming to.
Yeah. Exactly.
And thanks, Karina, for joining me as well.
Oh, yes, thank you so much, Karina. It's been lovely to meet you, and your little fluff ball on your lap.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Hello,
very cute.
Oh,
so cute.
Really.
Keeping you warm.
Yes.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. See you, everyone. Thank you,
Lovely
Lisa.
to see you all.
Bye-bye.